Alright, what's up, Dragon Brood? After doing all this other analysis of the set or whatever, I was really thinking, like, I've not really taken the time to just say, like, what are my favorite cards out of this set? I'm sure a lot of you have been asked that question. I saw some people on stream come up and say, like, hey, what are you liking? What are you seeing that's good? And that kind of got me thinking, maybe I should just do my list of cards that I actually just enjoy out of the set. So, that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's take a look at my, I guess, maybe top 10? Yeah, I said maybe top 10 because these aren't really in a particular order. These are just 10 cards I went through and said, I actually really like this card. So, let's start here with Phyrexian Fleshgorger. It's a 7 colorless 7/5 menace lifelink ward, has a cost of pay equal life to the power of Phyrexian Fleshgorger. Now, that actually sounds all fine and good, but 7's a lot. You can pay it a lot less. You can play it as a 3 mana, 3/3, and that's actually really good. And it still has Menace and Lifelink, which is pretty threatening. The thing about this card I think it's very good is that it can go into some other decks, like the mid-rangey black decks. People have been trying to find ways to play for real, serious, aggressive mono black aggro. This fits very well into that. If you have anything tricky that's bringing stuff out of the graveyard, it can fit into that. If you have something that's able to blink stuff, you know, exile it, put it back into play, it can fit into that. Like, I feel like this is one of those cards that's going to be able to find a home in a lot of quirky builds. And a lot of times it's going to end up being that card you don't even think about, and then you see it and you're like, oh yeah, it makes sense you're playing that card. So yeah, this card's really good. Just the life gain's awesome. Having Menace is a big thing. Just so many little things this card does well at both levels. So I really like this card. Not a surprise it's going for a pretty penny right now, but I think it's well earned. This is a very cool, like, it's making good use of the new prototype mechanic in the best ways possible. Next up, we got Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard. It's a green and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature, human soldier. Sacrifice Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard. Legendary creatures you control get +1/+0, gain indestructible until end of turn. What I like about this card is that it is possible that this could just go into some different aggro type decks, right? There's probably going to be some Gruul decks that play this, maybe even some soldier decks that are green, red, white, maybe being able to take advantage of this, which could be very cool. There's a lot of little interesting builds, but if you're playing stuff like Pioneer or Explorer, and you wanted to play Bard class, this fits very well into that as just being a free 3/3 that can protect some things. This also fits into the legendary Joda, creature decks, which is very good for that. So I like a lot of what this card does for a few different builds, and it's just quirky and solid. Not a lot to really complain about here. And it's pretty easy to get your hands on from a cost perspective, so if you do want to experiment with it, you're not out a whole bunch. So yeah, I like a lot going on with this card, and it's just unique and useful enough that you can find it, expect it to pop up, but it won't be so prevalent that we're going to get tired of seeing it. Harbin Vanguard Aviator, right? This is blue or white 3/2 flyer, which, by the way, if it was just a blue or white 3/2 flyer with some random ability, that would actually still be almost fine, considering it's a human and a soldier, so it's going to fit into multiple deck types for that. And whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+0, actually +1/+1, and gain flying until their turn. The thing about this too that's interesting is the way it reads is not all your soldiers you control get +1/+1. It's all your creatures. So if you happen to be playing enough things that have soldiers or make soldier tokens and something else on the side, that also gets +1/+1 and gains flying. So yeah, really cool card. Just a nice aggressive body, a 3/2 for 2 with flying and an upside. There's not a lot to complain about on this card. This is going to be really good. It's going to go into a lot of different decks. Like I said, it can fit humans because a lot of humans already happen to be soldiers in current standard, but obviously goes into the soldier deck. And these you can pick up for under $1. So like, yeah, card's really, really good. All right, Titania, Voice of Gaea. Green, colorless. So 3 mana for a 3/4 legendary creature elemental. It has reach. And when you have 1 or more lands cards put into your graveyard from anywhere, you get to gain 2 life. And then during your upkeep, if there's 4 more lands in the graveyard and you have the Argoth land, you get to turn it into this big dumb thing on the backside, right? The thing I like about Titania is that it encourages a different type of deck building, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like the other meld cards are kind of like, all right, you're already doing the thing with other good cards, and you kind of expect that, and you can just shoehorn these into a couple builds and they're going to do their thing, right? But this one feels like, okay, I have to build a deck targeting the idea to put lands in the graveyard, maybe get lands into play, mill some things, do some really interesting stuff to make this work. And I do have a deck where we make this work, but that to me is fun, right? It's a fun mythic that has a big upside that can do something really interesting. And it's hard for me to be upset at that, honestly. This is just a really cool card. I also like the fact that it does have reach randomly, so that actually helps it out a little bit too. Secret Reach is going to catch some people off guard. I don't know if this is the type of card I would play in Commander necessarily, but there are some things where if you're playing some of the older Titanias and stuff and you have cards going, lands going in and out of the graveyard, this is actually going to fit that as well. So it's got a home already in a few places and shouldn't cost you all that much to get your hands on these in the long run. Bushwhack. Not all the cards I actually like out of the set are rares and mythics. So this is just 1 green, sorcery, choose one. You get to search for a basic land, put it into your hand, or target creature you control fights a creature you don't control. What I like about this really is it always felt a little tough whenever you had fight spells in against decks that didn't have a lot of creatures, right? And you almost felt like you had a dead card. This kind of takes away that feeling. And it is only 1 green. Now, admittedly, it is sorcery speed, but for only 1 green, getting to fight is also really nice because it allows you to do a couple things, maybe pump up a creature during the course of the turn and then still get to kill something. Like, that's really nice. But also just being able to search for a basic in a pinch to let you cash your other stuff if you have a second or third color is also really good too. So yeah, just a good, versatile, flexible card that, yeah, just quality. I expect to see this show up in a lot of places. And while we're looking at other cheap spells, Teething Wormlet. It's a 1 green, 1/1. Has Death Touch as long as you have 3 or more artifacts. And then if an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. If it's the first time that's happened this turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. This set brings so many quality artifacts that this is exactly the type of card that I think some of the aggro decks have been missing as a quality 1-drop that grows very easily. Because we've had some other things that do, like the Wolf, right? Like that, the Pack Leader, that's cool, but you always have to pay something that costs 4, so it takes a while to make that happen. Like, there's other things there that you kind of have undervalued 1-mana creatures, right? This is actually pretty good because in the current standard, or going into Brothers War standard, you're actually going to be in a world where you can consistently play artifact or make treasure effectively every turn. So this is going to be really good. And not only is the creature growing, it's also going to gain you life. And that's going to make a big difference in those back and forth creature battles. So I do like this card. It's a little bit derpy. I mean, look at the artwork. But the card, actually pretty fun. I like what it's doing. I like that it encourages a deck to be built around it, or at least built with it in mind. And that always is a benefit for fun. So yeah, big fan of this card. All right, Brotherhood's in. Colorless red, sorcery. Choose one. Deal 3 damage to each creature in Planeswalker, or destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. You're probably wondering why I would put this card on a list of cards I like, because it probably destroys half the things I like to do. But that's exactly why, to be honest. Like, I feel like historically we've had these types of cards that deal 3 or deal 2 to all creatures or whatever, and they're kind of like, all right, that's a little bit lame, but sure. But in this case, we get one that hits creatures and planeswalkers, and if there's none out there, or we want to go a different route, this also lets us destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. And that's actually quite a few things, because our first thought is like, oh, we get to destroy treasure, we get to destroy power stones, but then there's also things like Bankbuster, right, that we want to kill. Like, things like that are also going to be on the menu to be able to get rid of with this. So I like a lot of that. Now, it doesn't exile, which is also nice. It just destroys. So that's actually a really good balance compared to a lot of cards we've been getting. But yeah, this card's going to pop up in quite a few places, and I expect if you see mid-rangey decks playing red, you can almost expect they're going to be packing this. Misery's Shadow. This is a colorless and a black for a shade. That's a 2/2. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, which is a great way to get rid of those wonderful, wonderful underdogs. And then you can pay a colorless, and it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This, honestly, and I'm not even exaggerating, might be one of the best shades, if you will, in Magic that they have made ever. Like, the fact that it's only 1 black and a colorless, you can splash it in anything that you're splashing black into. So any aggressive deck or anything that has a bunch of excess mana you might want to use, this goes in there, right? So that's already the first thing. It has a really nice extra ability that pretty much anything that dies and goes to the graveyard is going to be exiled by your opponent. So that's also good because that turns off a lot of things. And then on top of that, You can pay any color mana to pump it up. Not pump its power, pump it +1/+1. This card's good. Really, I expect we're going to see a decent amount of this. Again, if people are trying to build those super heavy aggro mono black builds or whatever, or black red, like this is the type of card that those decks are definitely going to want. And they're pretty cheap right now if you want to pick them up. So that's all the better. But yeah, this card seems really, really cool. Artwork, not that impressed with it, but I don't know what the art director gave them for shade, because you know, that's not the most easy thing to paint. But that aside, I actually think the card overall is very good. All right, Ashnod Flesh Mechanist. It's a black 1/1 human artificer with death touch, and when it attacks, you can sacrifice another creature. If you do, you create a power stone. You can pay 5 and exile a creature card from your graveyard, and then you create a 3/3 colorless zombie artifact creature token. The reason it's made the list is because I just like the weird space that it fits in, right? We don't have that many quality 1 mana black things. Now, we do have one that we see a lot, obviously, but it's pretty mana intensive to do what you want. Like, this is just a cool, quirky little ability. It having death touch is super annoying and a nuisance to your opponents. I'm just not like, I feel like this is one of those cards that if you find the right build for it, it's going to be really cool. Being able to sack things and make power stones and then use that to get things out of the graveyard. But this is also like a quirky little like quality little add of one for like the Joda decks. If you just want something for your 2 mana creatures to flip into, that's pretty cool. So I think it's going to fit a couple of little weird spots. And if you happen to play like Orzhov humans, this is a quality card for that. If something comes up over the next couple of sets with Artificers, I think this could be good as well. I almost feel like this card is a little bit of a plant for something that's coming. Like something more to do with Power Stones, something to do with sacrificing creatures, exiling stuff from the graveyard. Like this is, I think this is one of those cards that's like not going to do much now, and then somebody's going to put it into a deck like 6 months from now. We're going to be like, that's what you do with this. Right? So I love having these little type of things that just get your mind going. And, you know, it's not a bad investment at such a low price, but I wouldn't really go pick any up. I just think it's a really cool card. And then the final card I want to talk about is Siege Veteran. It's 2 colorless and a white for a 2/2 human soldier. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. This is kind of reminiscent of our favorite, well, not favorite, depending on what side you were on, Cleric. They got to do this for a while. But it has another cool ability that whenever another non-token soldier you control dies, you get a 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature token. What I like about this, it actually does a few things. It fits human decks, it fits soldier decks. It does fit into the 3 mana slot, which is a little tough because that could get crowded already in a lot of builds. But it does just let you grow a creature every turn. When your creatures die, you get extra token. And this actually gives you a little bit of protection against some sweepers as well, because when those die, you still get the triggers, and then you get 1/1 soldiers left behind. So I like that as well. This is actually a really cool overall card, and I expect to see it in a lot of different builds. Obviously in soldier stuff, but possibly even in some type of artifact-based builds, especially, you know, maybe with Ashnod where you're sacrificing things and then getting an extra artifact token, right? That's the exact type of build this could go in. So I think this is an interesting card because on its face, it's just quality, right? We know what it does. It goes into beatdown decks or whatever. But once you start processing the thought that those extra tokens happen to also be artifacts, maybe this goes into something else. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, really cool card overall, really good, really useful. I would recommend crafting them if you're going to play any type of aggressive deck that's even thinking about making use of it. The card was very good on early access. I would go ahead and craft them. And I have to say, it's still early in the season. We're still figuring out cards and building decks and whatever, but out of curiosity, what has been your favorite card so far? What did you see that impressed you on streams? What cards have you read across and went, I want to put that into a deck? Because I have no doubt everybody's going to be targeting something different. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.